My daughter stood in the lawyer's conference room, her Louboutin heels clicking against the marble floor, and told me I'd get nothing from my ex-wife's $185 million estate. "You're a convicted felon, Dad. A thief. Mom made sure you'd never touch a penny of what she built." 3 minutes later, the lawyer opened the will and read aloud, "To my ex-husband, Richard Brennan, I leave everything. My entire estate, all assets, all holdings, with one instruction. Use it better than I did. To my daughter, Jessica, I leave the truth, which she will find more valuable than money." You won't believe what happened next. Before we continue, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. This is a story about sacrifice, betrayal, and the most devastating truth a daughter could discover about her mother. The sound of rain against my apartment window had become my meditation. For the past 12 years, it had been the only constant in my life. A steady rhythm that asked nothing of me, judged nothing about me, expected nothing from me. I sat at my small desk in the corner of my one-bedroom apartment in East Vancouver, the glow of my laptop screen reflecting off my reading glasses. Friday afternoon meant I had 3 tax returns to finish before the weekend. Mr. Chen from the laundromat downstairs. The Kapoors who ran the convenience store. Young David, the Uber driver who was putting himself through UBC. Small accounts. Simple work. Honest work. My hands moved across the keyboard with the same precision they'd once used to manage billion-dollar portfolios. Muscle memory doesn't forget, even when everything else does. The apartment was quiet except for the rain and the occasional creak of the old radiator. No television. No music. I'd learned to appreciate silence over the years. It was honest. At least it didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. My phone buzzed on the desk. An unknown Toronto number. I almost didn't answer. I got enough spam calls. But something made me reach for it. "Is this Richard Brennan?" A woman's voice, professional, clipped. "This is he." "Mr. Brennan, this is Patricia Ashford from Crawford and Associates. I'm calling regarding the estate of Catherine Brennan." My hand stopped moving on the keyboard. Catherine. I hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years. Hadn't allowed myself to think it. "I see," I managed. "I'm sorry to inform you that Mrs. Brennan passed away on Tuesday. The funeral is tomorrow at 2 p.m. at Mount Pleasant Cemetery in Toronto. Following the service, there will be a reading of the will at our offices at 4 p.m. Your presence is requested." The words seemed to come from very far away. Catherine was dead. The woman I'd loved more than my own life. The woman I'd destroyed my career for. The woman who'd never spoken to me again. "Mr. Brennan, are you still there?" "Yes, I'm here. Will you be able to attend?" Every instinct told me to decline. What business did I have at Catherine's funeral? I was the disgraced ex-husband, the criminal who'd stolen from his own company. I'd seen the articles at the time. CFO Richard Brennan charged with embezzlement. Billion-dollar fraud uncovered at Meridian Technologies. They'd used my worst photo, the one where I looked guilty, even though I wasn't, but something in me, some stubborn remnant of who I'd once been, whispered that I should go. That I owed Catherine that much, at least. "I'll be there," I heard myself say. After I hung up, I sat very still, watching the rain run down the window in irregular streams. Toronto. I hadn't been back to Toronto in 12 years. Hadn't seen Jessica, my daughter, in almost as long. The last time had been in a courtroom, her face white with shame as the judge read my sentence. She'd been 28 then, just starting to make a name for herself in the tech world. Now she'd be 40, a stranger. I closed my laptop and walked to the small closet where I kept my one good suit. Navy blue, slightly outdated but well-maintained. I'd worn it to job interviews that never led anywhere, to meetings with probation officers, to the small accounting firm where I'd eventually found work doing taxes for people who paid in cash and didn't ask questions about my past. I held up the suit, checking for moths or stains. It would do. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the last time I'd seen Catherine. It had been in her hospital room 3 months after my sentencing. She'd been recovering from the stress-induced heart attack that had nearly killed her. Jessica had been there too, standing guard like a sentinel. "You need to leave," Jessica had said, her voice cold. "You've done enough damage." Catherine had turned her face away, wouldn't look at me. That silence had hurt more than any words could have. I'd left. I'd taken a bus to Vancouver, as far from Toronto as I could get while staying in Canada. I'd started over with nothing. No reputation, no connections, no references. Just a 60-year-old man with a criminal record trying to remember how to be human again. The next morning, I booked the cheapest flight I could find. Red-eye to Toronto, arriving at 6 a.m. the day of the funeral. I packed my suit, a spare shirt, and my phone charger in a small duffel bag. No point in bringing more. I'd be back in Vancouver by Sunday. The flight was turbulent. I spent most of it staring out the window at darkness, thinking about Catherine. We'd met at university, both studying finance. She'd been brilliant, ambitious, driven in ways that terrified and attracted me in equal measure. I'd been steady, reliable, the kind of man who could support someone's dreams without needing to be the star. We'd made a good team, or so I'd thought. We'd built Meridian Technologies together from nothing. Started in a garage with borrowed computers and big ideas. By the time we were 40, we'd taken it public. By 50, we were billionaires. Catherine was CEO, the face of the company. I was CFO, the one who made sure the numbers worked, who kept us solvent, who found the funding. Jessica had grown up in boardrooms and on private jets. She'd never wanted for anything. Maybe that was the problem. The plane landed as dawn was breaking over Toronto. The city looked different than I remembered. More towers, more construction, more everything. I took a taxi to a cheap motel near the cemetery, $200 a night, which seemed outrageous for a room with questionable stains and a view of a parking lot. But it was close, and I wouldn't be staying long. I showered, shaved carefully, dressed in my navy suit. The man in the mirror looked old, 72 now, gray hair thinning, face lined with years of regret and silence. But my hands were steady as I knotted my tie. Engineering discipline. Some things you never lose. The funeral started at 2 p.m. I arrived 15 minutes early and stood in the back of the chapel. The room was packed. Catherine had been famous in tech circles. Pioneer, visionary, one of the first women to build a billion-dollar company from scratch. There were faces I recognized from magazines and news shows. Industry leaders, politicians, people whose net worth exceeded small countries. And there, in the front row, was Jessica. She'd inherited Catherine's beauty. Dark hair pulled back in an elegant chignon, a black Chanel suit that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. She sat with perfect posture, flanked by lawyers and executives, accepting condolences from a stream of powerful people. She looked every inch the grieving daughter, the heir apparent, the next generation of Brennan's success. She didn't see me. Or if she did, she gave no sign of recognition. The service was elegant, impersonal. A pastor who'd clearly never met Catherine spoke about faith and legacy. A business partner gave a speech about innovation and leadership. Jessica stood and delivered a eulogy about her mother's strength, her vision, her dedication to building something that would outlast her. She didn't mention me once. It was as if I'd never existed. As if our 32 years of marriage, our partnership, our life together had been erased from the official record. I suppose in a way it had been. After the service, as people filed out to the cemetery for the burial, I stayed in my seat. I wasn't going to the graveside. I wasn't family anymore. I wasn't anything. But Patricia Ashford, the lawyer who'd called me, appeared at my elbow. "Mr. Brennan, you'll need to come to the burial. Your presence is required for the will reading afterward." I followed her out into weak October sunlight. The cemetery was massive, rolling hills dotted with monuments and mausoleums. Catherine's plot was in a prime location, naturally. Only the best for Catherine Brennan. The crowd at the graveside was smaller but still impressive. I stood far back, partially hidden behind an oak tree. Jessica stood at the front, accepting a folded flag from the honor guard. Catherine had been big on ceremony. As they lowered the casket into the ground, I found myself remembering not the bad times, not the betrayal and the trial, but earlier days. Catherine laughing at a terrible joke I'd made. Catherine staying up all night to finish a pitch deck, fueled by coffee and determination. Catherine holding baby Jessica for the first time, tears streaming down her face. Who had that woman been? And when had she disappeared? After the burial, a smaller group reconvened at the law offices of Crawford and Associates. Sleek downtown tower, 32nd floor, conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Ontario. I was ushered into a seat near the back. Jessica sat at the head of the table with her lawyers. She still hadn't acknowledged me. Patricia Ashford stood at the front of the room, a leather-bound document in her hands. "Thank you all for coming. We're here for the reading of Catherine Marie Brennan's last will and testament, executed 6 months ago and filed with this office in accordance with her wishes." 6 months ago, Catherine had known she was dying. Heart disease, probably. The same condition that had nearly killed her 12 years ago. Before we begin the formal reading, Mrs. Brennan left specific instructions. Patricia looked directly at me. "Richard Brennan must be present for the entire reading. No one may leave until it's complete. All electronic devices must be surrendered, and there is a sealed letter to be opened first, before the will itself." Jessica's head turned sharply. She'd finally noticed me. Her expression was complex. Surprise, disgust, anger. "What is he doing here? Per your mother's explicit instructions, he must be present. Now, if we could have all phones and recording devices." There was grumbling, but people complied. Patricia collected devices in a basket, then locked the conference room door. The room suddenly felt very small. Patricia broke the seal on a cream-colored envelope and pulled out several pages of handwritten paper. Catherine's handwriting. "I'd know it anywhere. This letter is to be read aloud before the will," Patricia said. "It is dated 3 weeks before Catherine's death and notarized by this office." She began to read. "To those present at my will reading, this is my confession. My final act of cowardice, and perhaps my only act of courage. 12 years ago, Meridian Technologies was investigated for securities fraud, specifically the manipulation of earnings reports and the misrepresentation of company assets to inflate stock value. The investigation revealed systematic theft of investor funds totaling $800 million over a period of 5 years. My ex-husband, Richard Brennan, was charged, tried, and convicted of these crimes. He served 5 years in federal prison. His reputation was destroyed. His career ended. His relationship with our daughter severed. Richard Brennan did not commit these crimes. I did. The room exploded. Jessica shot to her feet. That's a lie. That's impossible. My mother would never. Sit down, Patricia said sharply. You will hear the entire letter. I authorized every fraudulent transaction. I manipulated every report. I stole from our investors to fund expansion projects I knew were failures, to cover losses I'd hidden from the board, to maintain the illusion of success when the company was hemorrhaging money. When the investigation began, I panicked. I knew exposure would mean prison, disgrace, the destruction of everything I'd built. So, I shifted the digital trail to make it appear that Richard had committed the fraud. I had access to his passwords, his computer, his email. I manufactured evidence. I created a false paper trail. And when the investigators came, all signs pointed to him. Richard figured out what I'd done within days of the charges being filed. He came to me and asked for the truth. I lied to his face. I told him I'd been framed by someone else, that we were both victims, that we had to fight this together. He believed me, or he said he did. A week before the trial, Richard came to me again. This time he had proof of what I'd done. Financial records I'd thought were destroyed. Communications I'd assumed were secure. He had everything he needed to expose me. Instead, he made me a deal. He would plead guilty to all charges. He would accept full responsibility. He would protect the company, protect our daughter, protect everything we'd built. In exchange, I would promise 3 things. 1, I would run Meridian honestly from that day forward. No more fraud, no more theft, no more lies. 2, I would ensure Jessica was taken care of, that she wanted for nothing, that she had every opportunity to succeed. 3, I would tell the truth before I died, no matter how much time had passed. He extracted these promises from me, and I agreed. Then he walked into court and destroyed his life to save mine. The room was dead silent now. Jessica had gone white as paper. Why? Someone asked. Why would he do that? Because I was having a heart attack, the letter continued. Because the stress of the investigation had literally stopped my heart, and Richard found me unconscious in my office. He called the ambulance. He rode with me to the hospital. He sat by my bed for 3 days while doctors said I might not survive. And when I woke up, when I was weak and terrified and facing the possibility of prison, he made his choice. He chose me over himself. He chose our daughter's future over his own. He chose to be the villain so I could remain the hero. I have spent 12 years living with this choice. I built Meridian into a $185 million company. I became more successful, more celebrated, more admired. And every achievement was poisoned because I knew the truth. I knew who I really was. I knew what I'd done to the man who'd loved me enough to sacrifice everything. I tried to tell the truth many times. I drafted confessions, hired lawyers, prepared statements. But I was a coward. I couldn't face the consequences. I couldn't bear the thought of prison, of disgrace, of losing everything I'd built on top of Richard's sacrifice. So I stayed silent. And I watched from a distance as Richard disappeared into obscurity. I watched Jessica grow to hate her father. I watched the world celebrate me as a pioneer while condemning him as a criminal. And I said nothing. This is my confession. This is the truth I should have told 12 years ago. Richard Brennan is innocent. He has always been innocent. And I am the monster who destroyed him. Patricia set down the first page and picked up the second. Now, as to my estate, I have structured this will to acknowledge what I've done and to make what amends I can, knowing they will never be enough. To my ex-husband, Richard Brennan, I leave my entire estate. All stock holdings in Meridian Technologies. All real property. All financial assets. All intellectual property rights. Everything. The current valuation is approximately $185 million. This includes controlling interest in Meridian Technologies, 51% of all shares. Jessica's face had gone from white to red. That's not legal. She's my mother. I'm her heir. She can't. The will is entirely legal, Patricia said. Your mother was of sound mind when she executed it. It's been reviewed by multiple attorneys and judges. It's ironclad. To my daughter Jessica, the letter continued, I leave something more valuable than money. I leave you the truth. Your father is a good man who sacrificed everything for people he loved. I am not a good person. I built my success on lies, theft, and betrayal. I allowed you to grow up hating your father while knowing he was innocent. I watched you cut him out of your life and said nothing. I let you believe you were the daughter of a hero and the child of a villain when the opposite was true. I'm sorry, Jessica. I'm sorry for being weak. I'm sorry for being selfish. I'm sorry for teaching you to value success over integrity, wealth over character, image over truth. You deserved better. You deserved the truth. And I was too much of a coward to give it to you. My hope, my only hope, is that you'll use this revelation to become better than I was. To value what actually matters. To understand that sacrifice is love, and love is worth more than any amount of money or success or acclaim. Your father loved you enough to go to prison rather than see you grow up with a mother behind bars. I loved myself too much to tell you the truth. Learn from that difference. Be like him, not like me. Patricia set down the letter. The formal will is brief. All assets to Richard Brennan, as stated. One provision: Richard cannot sell controlling interest in Meridian Technologies for a period of 5 years to ensure the company remains stable. After that, he may do with it as he wishes. Jessica, you receive $50,000, the contents of your mother's personal safety deposit box, and any items of sentimental value you wish to claim from the estate. Additionally, Richard is empowered but not required to employ you in any capacity at Meridian Technologies at his sole discretion. The reading is complete. The room erupted again. Lawyers jumped up, shouting about challenges and appeals and fraud. Journalists who'd somehow gotten into the room were frantically taking notes despite the device ban. And Jessica stood frozen, staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. Shock, grief, rage, disbelief, all competing for space on her face. I stood slowly. I'm going back to Vancouver, I said to Patricia. Please send any paperwork that needs my signature. Mr. Brennan, you're now the majority shareholder of a publicly traded company. There are immediate decisions that require your attention. Then get someone to make them. I've spent 12 years learning to live small. I'm not ready to live big again. I walked toward the door. Jessica's voice stopped me. Is it true? I turned. She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. All of it? You went to prison for her? Yes. Why? Because she was dying. Because you were 28 and needed your mother. Because I was 60 and could survive prison. Because that's what you do when you love someone. You don't love them anymore? I stopped loving the person she became, but I never stopped loving the person she was. And I never stopped loving you, even though you hated me. Even though you wouldn't take my calls or read my letters or believe anything except what your mother told you. I understood why. I made my choice knowing what it would cost. I'm so sorry. The words came out broken. I didn't know. All these years I thought you were a thief, I finished. A criminal. A disappointment. I know what you thought. Can you forgive me? It's not about forgiveness. You were a child who believed her mother. There's nothing to forgive, but him. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Can you forgive her? I don't know. I've spent 12 years trying. Ask me in another 12. I left the conference room and took the elevator down to street level. The October air was crisp, carrying the smell of fallen leaves and approaching winter. Toronto was beautiful in autumn. I'd forgotten that. I walked for hours, no destination in mind. Past the financial district where I'd once had an office with a view of the harbor. Past the condo Catherine and I had owned, sold now to strangers. Past the park where I'd taught Jessica to ride a bike, her 6-year-old laughter echoing off the trees. The city was full of ghosts. My phone buzzed constantly. Calls from lawyers, journalists, financial advisors, all the parasites that swarm around sudden wealth. I ignored them all. As evening fell, I found myself at the waterfront. The lake was dark, choppy with wind. I sat on a bench and watched the lights of the city reflect on the water. $185 million. It was impossible. Absurd. What was I supposed to do with that kind of money? I'd spent 12 years living on $30,000 a year. I'd been happy, or at least content. I had my small apartment, my small clients, my small life that asked nothing more of me than honest work and quiet existence. Now I was supposed to what? Run a technology company? Manage a fortune? Rejoin the world that had destroyed me? Footsteps on the boardwalk. I didn't need to turn to know it was Jessica. I could hear Catherine in her gait, the same determined stride. Can I sit? It's a public bench. She sat, maintaining careful distance between us. We watched the water in silence for several minutes. I need to understand, she finally said. Why you did it. Really why. Not the noble version, the real reason. I turned to look at her. In the fading light, she looked so much like her mother, it hurt. Your mother had a heart attack. A serious one. The doctors said another one would kill her. Stress was the trigger. The investigation, the charges, the possibility of prison, it was literally killing her. So you sacrificed yourself to reduce her stress. It wasn't that simple. Then explain it to me. I thought about how to answer. Your mother and I built Meridian together. It was our dream, our legacy, the thing we'd spent 30 years creating. When I discovered what she'd done, I was devastated. Not just by the fraud, but by the fact that she'd done it without telling me. That she'd kept secrets that big. That she'd put everything we'd built at risk. But I also understood why. She was terrified of failure. Terrified that the company would collapse and prove all the people wrong who said a woman couldn't build a tech empire. She'd made terrible choices out of fear, and now those choices were going to destroy her. And you loved her. I loved what we'd built together. I loved our daughter. I loved the idea that some good could come from this disaster. If I went to prison, the company could survive. You could have your mother. The scandal would be contained. And maybe Catherine would learn to run the company honestly going forward. Did she? I don't know. I haven't followed Meridian in 12 years. I couldn't bear to watch her succeed on top of my sacrifice. She did succeed. Meridian is worth 10 times what it was when you went to prison. She grew it into one of the most successful tech companies in Canada. She became famous, celebrated, and the whole time she knew it was built on your sacrifice. How did she live with herself? Apparently not well, since she's dead at 70. The bitterness in my voice surprised me. I'd thought I'd let go of anger years ago. You're entitled to be angry. I'm entitled to have wasted my life for nothing. It wasn't for nothing. The company survived. I had a mother for 12 more years. You maintained your integrity even in prison. Integrity doesn't pay rent. It doesn't buy food. It doesn't get you hired when you have a criminal record. I spent 5 years in prison and 7 years rebuilding a life from nothing. And for what? So your mother could die rich and famous while I filed taxes in a studio apartment? Then take the money, take the company, take everything she left you, use it to build something better than she did. I don't want it. Dad, you have to want it. Because if you don't take it, it'll go to the state. And then her sacrifice, her confession, her attempt to make this right, it'll all be meaningless. It's already meaningless. No money can give me back 12 years. No amount of wealth can restore my reputation. I'm 72 years old. I don't have time to rebuild an empire. Then let me help you. I stared at her. What? Let me help you run Meridian. I know the company. I've worked in tech for 12 years. I have connections, knowledge, ideas. And I need to do this. I need to make this right. You can't make your mother's choices right. No, but I can make my choices right. I can stop being the daughter who abandoned her father. I can become the person he sacrificed everything to give me the chance to be. Please, let me try. The wind off the lake was cold now, carrying the promise of winter. I pulled my coat tighter. Why? Why would you want to work with me? You've spent 12 years believing I'm a criminal. And I was wrong. I was so devastatingly wrong. But that doesn't mean I can just snap my fingers and believe everything's fine now. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to let me try to build something with you. The way you and Mom did before everything fell apart. We're not going to recreate the past. I don't want to recreate the past. I want to build something new. Something honest. Something that honors what you sacrificed instead of profiting from it. I thought about this. About whether I had it in me to trust again, to work with my daughter who'd hated me, to step back into a world that had destroyed me. Engineering principle, solve one problem at a time. I stood. I'm going back to Vancouver tomorrow. I'll think about what you said, but I'm not promising anything. Can I have your number? So I can call you? I wrote it on a scrap of paper from my wallet. She took it like it was precious. Thank you. For what? For not hating me. For giving me a chance to be better than I was. I don't hate you, Jessica. I never did. The walk back to my motel took an hour. My flight was at 6 a.m. the next morning. I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark room watching shadows from passing cars play across the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened. Catherine was dead. The woman I'd loved and lost and sacrificed for was gone, and she'd left me everything. Not as reward, I understood. As penance. As her final act of cowardice, hiding behind death to finally tell the truth she couldn't speak in life. What was I supposed to do with that? What was anyone supposed to do with a confession and a fortune in 12 years too late? The taxi to the airport was quiet. I checked in, went through security, sat at my gate watching early morning travelers hurry past. Business people with rolling luggage and coffee cups, families with crying children, students with backpacks. All of them moving through the world with purpose, with destination, with some idea of who they were and where they were going. I had no idea anymore. For 12 years, I'd known exactly who I was. Richard Brennan, disgraced CFO, convicted criminal, tax preparer for small business owners who didn't judge. That identity had been simple, clear, uncomplicated. Now I was supposed to be what? Billionaire? Vindicated innocent? Martyred saint? The owner of a technology company I hadn't worked at in over a decade? None of it felt real. None of it felt like me. The plane boarded. I took my seat in coach, same as always, and watched Toronto disappear below as we climbed into gray October sky. I thought I'd feel something. Relief. Vindication. Closure. But I felt only tired. Tired and old and uncertain about everything. Back in Vancouver, my apartment looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I looked at it differently now, knowing I could afford anything, live anywhere, be anyone. The rent was paid through the end of the month. $750 for 400 square feet. I'd thought that was expensive when I'd moved in. Now it was nothing. I could buy this building. I could buy this block. I could buy anything. The realization made me nauseous. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. 3 tax returns still waiting. Mr. Chen. The Kapoors. Young David. Simple work, honest work, work that mattered to people who needed it. I finished them all by midnight, sent them off, charged my modest fees, felt the satisfaction of work completed. That, at least, hadn't changed. Monday morning, my phone rang. Jessica's number. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Did you decide? About what? About Meridian. About me helping. About everything. I've spent 12 years learning to be small, I said. Learning to want nothing, expect nothing, need nothing. I don't know if I can go back to being big. You don't have to be big. You just have to let me try to build something good. Why should I trust you? You spent 12 years believing I was a criminal. Because I spent 12 years being wrong. And because you're my father and I've wasted 12 years we could have had together. And because Mom gave you this fortune not to make you rich, but to give you a chance to decide what kind of man you want to be with it. And what kind of man should I be? I don't know. But I know what kind of man you've been. Honest, principled, willing to sacrifice everything for people you loved. That's worth more than any amount of money. That's what I want to learn to be. I closed my eyes, thought about my small apartment, my small clients, my small life. Thought about whether I wanted to give that up, whether I could bear to step back into a world of board meetings and shareholder calls and all the complexity I'd left behind. Come to Vancouver, I finally said. Friday afternoon. We'll talk. Really. But I'm not promising anything beyond a conversation. That's all I'm asking for. She hung up. I sat at my desk watching rain streak down the window and wondered what I'd just agreed to. Friday came too quickly. Jessica texted that she'd landed at noon. I gave her the address of a small coffee shop near my apartment. Neutral territory. Public space. Somewhere I could leave if the conversation went wrong. She arrived exactly on time, dressed down in jeans and a sweater. No Louboutins, no Chanel. She looked younger, more like the daughter I remembered. We ordered coffee and sat in a corner booth. I've been thinking about what you said, she started. About building something honest. What does that mean to you? It means running Meridian the way Mom should have. Transparent financials. Ethical practices. Products that actually help people instead of just generating revenue. She pulled out a folder. I've been researching Meridian's current operations. Mom grew it, but she grew it in ways that bother me. Data mining that exploits users. Labor practices that are legal but unethical. Environmental impacts she ignored because addressing them would be expensive. So you want to reform the company. I want to transform it. Make it something we can both be proud of. Something that honors what you sacrificed instead of profiting from it. And what if I don't want to be involved? What if I just want to sell controlling interest and go back to my life? Then you'd be letting Mom win. You'd be proving that the sacrifice meant nothing. That 12 years of your life were wasted so she could build something hollow and profitable that died with her. Low blow. True though, I sipped my coffee. It was good. Local roaster, fair trade beans, $3 a cup. Simple pleasure. If I did this, if I agreed to be involved, I'd have conditions. Name them. We start slow. I'm not moving back to Toronto. I'm not giving up my apartment or my clients or my life here. If we do this, we do it remotely for now. Agreed. I want complete transparency. Full financial audits. Everything Mom did, I want to know about it. Every decision, every deal, every compromise she made. Done. And I want you to understand something. I'm not doing this to be rich. I'm not doing this to reclaim my reputation. I'm doing this because maybe there's a chance to take something terrible and make it slightly less terrible. To turn your mother's cowardice into something that helps people. But I'm not interested in building an empire or making billions. If we're successful, we give it away. All of it? Most of it. We keep enough to be comfortable, secure, taken care of. The rest goes to causes that matter. Education, poverty relief, climate change, whatever we decide together. That's the only way this is worth doing. Jessica stared at me for a long moment. You're serious. Completely. Mom leaves you $185 million, and you want to give it away. I want to use it properly. Your mother built her wealth on lies. If we keep it, we're no better than she was. If we use it to help people, maybe we redeem something. Maybe we turn her failure into someone else's success. I love that idea. You do? Dad, I've spent 12 years working in tech, making apps that addict teenagers and harvest user data and generate profits for shareholders who don't care about anything except quarterly earnings. I'm tired of it. I want to build something that matters. Then we have a deal. We shook hands across the coffee shop table. Her grip was firm, determined. Catherine's grip. But maybe, I hoped, used for better purposes. Over the next 3 months, we met every Friday. Sometimes in person when Jessica flew to Vancouver. Sometimes on video calls. We went through Meridian's operations with forensic precision. What we found wasn't pretty. Catherine had run the company successfully, but she'd cut corners everywhere. Underpaid workers in overseas facilities. Aggressive tax avoidance that was legal but ethically questionable. User agreements that sold personal data to the highest bidder. Environmental impacts she'd hidden through creative accounting. She'd built an empire, but she'd built it the way she'd built everything. With lies, shortcuts, and sacrifices of other people. We started making changes. Increased wages for factory workers. Brought manufacturing back to Canada where we could ensure fair labor practices. Ended data mining operations. Implemented privacy protections that actually protected privacy. Started environmental remediation programs. The board of directors was furious. These changes will cost hundreds of millions, they told us. Profit margins will shrink. Stock prices will fall. Good, I said. We're not in business to maximize profit. We're in business to make products that help people without exploiting them. If that means lower profits, so be it. You'll destroy the company, or we'll prove that ethical business can still be successful. Let's find out. Shareholders sued, of course, claimed we were betraying our fiduciary duty. Jessica and I appeared in court together, presenting our case. We argued that long-term sustainability and ethical practice would ultimately be more profitable than short-term exploitation. We showed research, projections, examples of other companies that had succeeded this way. The judge ruled in our favor. Barely. But it was enough. Stock prices did fall initially. 20% drop in the first quarter after we announced changes. Business publications wrote scathing articles about naive idealism destroying shareholder value. Analysts predicted Meridian would be bankrupt within 2 years. Then something unexpected happened. Customers noticed. People started buying Meridian products specifically because of our practices. Ethical consumers who'd avoided tech companies found one they could support. Investors interested in sustainable, responsible business started buying stock. Talented workers, tired of corporate exploitation, applied to work for us. By the end of the first year, we'd recovered our stock losses. By the end of the second year, we'd exceeded previous valuations. Meridian became proof that doing good could also do well. We donated profits aggressively. $50 million to educational programs in underserved communities. $30 million to climate change research. $20 million to criminal justice reform, because I knew firsthand how the system destroyed people. We established the Catherine Brennan Foundation, named for my ex-wife, dedicated to helping other people who'd made terrible mistakes find paths to redemption. Every decision we asked ourselves, would this make the world slightly better? If the answer was no, we didn't do it. It was exhausting. It was complicated. It was the hardest I'd worked since building Meridian the first time. But it mattered. And that made all the difference. Jessica and I rebuilt our relationship slowly. Friday coffee meetings turned into weekly dinners. She told me about her life, the 12 years I'd missed. Her relationships, her struggles, her regrets about how she treated me. I told her about prison, about starting over, about learning to find peace and simplicity. We didn't fix everything. You can't repair 12 years of damage in a few months. But we tried. And trying was enough. On the anniversary of Catherine's death, Jessica and I stood at her grave. Simple headstone, nothing ostentatious. Catherine Marie Brennan, CEO, mother, flawed human being. We'd chosen the epitaph together. Do you forgive her? Jessica asked. I thought about this question, the one I'd been avoiding for a year. I forgive her for being human, for making mistakes, for being scared, for being weak. But I don't forgive her for staying silent, for letting me suffer 12 years when she could have spoken up, for choosing her comfort over my life. Some things are unforgivable. Does that make you a bad person? To not forgive? It makes me honest, which is more than your mother ever managed to be. We stood in silence for a while. Then Jessica said, I want you to know something. What you did, sacrificing yourself, it changed how I think about everything. About family, about love, about what it means to be a good person. I spent 12 years thinking success was what mattered. Building something big, making money, being important. But watching you live small, live honestly, live with integrity, even when it cost you everything, that taught me what actually matters. I'm trying to be more like you. Don't try too hard. I've made plenty of mistakes, but you made them honestly. Mom made mistakes and covered them up with lies. There's a difference. We left the cemetery and drove to my apartment. Jessica had never seen where I lived. She walked around the small space, taking in the single room that served as bedroom, living room, and office. The kitchenette barely big enough to cook in. The bathroom with the old fixtures. You really lived here for 12 years. I really did. And you were happy? I was content, which is sometimes better than happy. We could buy you a bigger place. A condo downtown, a house in Kitsilano. Whatever you want. I like it here. It's honest. It asks nothing of me except rent and basic maintenance. There's freedom in that. But you're a billionaire now. Technically, you could live anywhere. And I choose here. At least for now. Maybe someday I'll want something different. But right now, this is enough. She shook her head, smiling. You're impossible. I'm consistent. We ordered takeout and ate, sitting on my small couch, watching rain through the window. The same rain that had been my meditation for 12 years. I've been thinking, Jessica said, about the foundation. About Catherine Brennan Foundation. What about it? I want to add a program specifically for people like you. People who were wrongly convicted or who sacrificed themselves for others. Help them rebuild their lives. Give them resources, support, opportunities. Make sure they don't have to spend 12 years living in studio apartments because nobody will hire them. I think your mother would approve of that. Do you approve? I think it's a good use of resources. Will you help me design it? Will you tell your story so others can understand what they're going through? That's asking a lot. I know, but I think it would help people. I'll think about it. She stayed until midnight, talking about plans for Meridian, for the foundation, for all the things we might build together. After she left, I sat at my desk and looked out at Vancouver. The city lights reflected off wet pavement. Somewhere out there, Mr. Chen was probably closing his laundromat. The Kapors were locking up their store. David was driving his last passengers home. Small lives, honest lives, people doing their best with what they had. A year ago, I'd been one of them. Now I was something different. Someone with resources, with opportunity, with the chance to make real change. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, It felt like responsibility. Heavy, complicated, impossible to fully understand. But maybe that was okay. Maybe the point wasn't to have it all figured out. Maybe the point was just to keep trying, to use what you had to make things slightly better, to honor sacrifice by living worthy of it. I opened my laptop and started drafting an email to my small clients, telling them I'd be scaling back my practice, but I'd make sure they were taken care of, connected with good accountants who would treat them fairly. It felt like ending something, but endings were also beginnings. My phone buzzed. Jessica, texting. Thank you for tonight. For letting me see your real life. For trusting me enough to be yourself instead of who you think you should be. I'm proud to be your daughter. I read the message 3 times. Thought about responding. Decided to let the words sit. Let them mean what they meant without dilution. Outside, the rain continued. Steady, reliable, honest. Asking nothing, judging nothing, expecting nothing. Just existing, just being what it was. I turned off my laptop, made tea, and sat in the dark listening to water against glass. Tomorrow I'd figure out how to be a billionaire who lived in a studio apartment. How to run a company from 3,000 miles away. How to honor Catherine's sacrifice by being better than she'd been. How to help my daughter become the person she wanted to be. How to use wealth without letting it corrupt, power without letting it poison, opportunity without letting it overwhelm. Tomorrow. Tonight, I just sat in the dark and listened to the rain and thought about second chances. About how Catherine had spent her final act trying to give me one. About how Jessica was spending her present trying to build one with me. About how I'd spent 12 years building one for myself. And about how maybe, just maybe, all of us deserve the chance to become better than we'd been. Even if it took dying to find the courage. Even if it took losing everything to understand what mattered. Even if it took 12 years and $185 million and a confession from beyond the grave to finally make things right. The story isn't finished until you stop trying, I thought. Until you give up. Until you let the mistakes and the betrayals and the losses define you instead of refine you. Catherine's story was finished, but mine was still being written. And Jessica's. And everyone's who still had breath and choice and the courage to try one more time. That was the real inheritance Catherine had left. Not the money or the company, but the reminder that it's never too late to tell the truth. Never too late to make amends. Never too late to become who you should have been all along. I finished my tea, rinsed the cup, prepared for bed. Tomorrow would come with its complications and responsibilities and impossible choices. But tonight I had rain and silence and the peace of knowing I'd made it through. 12 years of exile, 1 year of transformation. And whatever came next. I'd survived worse. I'd rebuild again if I had to. And this time, I'd do it with my daughter beside me. That was worth more than any fortune. That was the real inheritance. That was everything.